Check 1, 2, check 1, 2. Hi, Miss Sanchez. Can we just do a quick audio check?
Of course, can you hear me?
Perfectly. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
The Subcommittee on Social Security will come to order. Welcome to our witnesses and audience members. Thank you and everyone for being here today. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the recent retirement of Subcommittee and Republican leader Tom Reed. It was an honor to serve and work with Tom, and I know he will be missed. I welcome Mr. Hearn, who is with us today as acting ranking member, and look forward to working with him as well. Before we go further, out of respect, especially to our colleague Brian Higgins, we'd like to pause and observe a moment of silence for the tragedy that occurred in Buffalo this past weekend. In this hybrid hearing format, we will proceed in the same fashion as the subcommittee always has. And we will begin with opening statements by the chair and acting ranking member, followed by testimony from our witnesses, and an opportunity for each member to inquire for 5 minutes. we will dispense with our practice of observing the Gibbons rule and instead go to in order of seniority for questioning, alternating between minority and majority. I know that we may have a few Ways and Means members who are not members of the subcommittee who are joining us today, and they will be permitted to inquire after all subcommittee members have had an opportunity to ask their questions. As a reminder, members who are joining remotely are responsible for muting and unmuting themselves throughout the proceeding. All members and witnesses, please make sure to keep your microphone muted when you are not speaking. This will help minimize the feedback. For those of you joining me here in person, it is good to see you. And for those joining remotely, I'm glad you're able to participate as well. With that, I would like to welcome everyone to the Committee on Ways and Means Social Security Subcommittee on Strengthening Social Security's Customer Service. Thank you to our witnesses for taking the time out of your day and for the expertise that you will bring to this open discussion. I will begin by recognizing myself for the purposes of an opening statement. We are holding this important hearing today to spotlight and underscore customer service challenges at the Social Security Administration during the COVID-19 pandemic and prior to 2020. Americans know and understand Social Security is an earned benefit which Congress has established and that they have paid for with each and every paycheck. We have all heard stories from our constituents and from well-publicized articles across the country of the struggles Americans are having accessing benefits and services while the field offices were closed during the pandemic due to health and safety concerns. We have also heard from employees and union members. As chair of the subcommittee, we have conducted extensive oversight of the agency during the pandemic, contacting the agency repeatedly regarding our concerns about customer service during the pandemic and have requested 4 reports from the General Accountability Office and the Office of Inspector General. We would also like to thank the Chairman of the Oversight Subcommittee, Bill Pascrell, and Chairman of the Worker Family Subcommittee, Danny Davis, for their work to ensure that both Social Security and Supplemental Security income beneficiaries have access to benefits and services. In one of the recent reports we requested from the Inspector General focused on the difficulties with telephone service, resulting in long wait times, sometimes more than an hour, recurring busy signals, and disconnections. Without objection, I would ask that I enter into the record the letters to SSA and the GAO and the Inspector General for the record. I would also like to submit written testimony from the American Federation of Government Employees of the AFL-CIO, representing 43,000 employees at SSA. Without objection, so ordered. In May of 2020, the subcommittee held a roundtable with stakeholders, and in July of 2020, a public hearing on the impact of COVID on Social Security and its beneficiaries. As we will hear today, many seniors, low-income individuals, people of color, and those with disabilities don't have access to a computer or have difficulty navigating the phone system. In-person walk-up service to SSA is essential to removing those barriers. But we should remember that SSA has struggled to provide adequate customer service even before the pandemic due to administrative funding that has not kept pace with inflation or the agency's growing number of beneficiaries. This is a nonpartisan issue and should be resolved, as I like to say, in the family. The number of beneficiaries since 2010 has grown by 21%, from 54 million to 65 million, yet SSA's budget has fallen by 14% during that same time when you adjust for inflation. As a result, SSA was forced to shrink its workforce, and now SSA has fewer than 60,000 workers, which is the lowest in 25 years, despite almost double the number of beneficiaries and compounded by the pandemic and the 10,000 baby boomers a day who become eligible for Social Security. Compared to 2010, SSA has 13% fewer employees available to serve the public, a loss of 1 out of every 8 positions. The agency was also forced to shut 67 field offices, shorten hours in its field offices that were open to the public, and put off critical updates to its information technology and telephone system. More than 100,000 Americans have died awaiting final decision on their appeal for SSA disability benefits. That is flat out unacceptable. I recently visited the field offices in my district, and the SSA employees I met are extremely dedicated and hardworking public servants doing an almost impossible job with the resources they have. They shared with me the hiring and retention problems caused by lack of funding. SSA's operations funding, its retirement, dependent and disability benefits are primarily funded by the Social Security trust funds, which in turn are funded through workers' contributions through FICA, the Federal Insurance Contribution Act, with each and every paycheck. It is the largest federal agency serving 65 million Americans with an average of 40 million field office visitors a year prior to the pandemic, paying out more than $1 trillion in benefits each year, and also it is the most efficient federal agency. Everyone should take pride in that fact. I know a little bit about insurance, and to have a 99% loss ratio is something that would be the envy of any private sector insurance company. The envy, because they aren't even close to that. I want to commend the agency on its reopening April the 7th with 98% of its 1,200 field offices open to walk-in visitors and with its increased use of telework for employees. Members of this subcommittee and I are joining with Senators Brown, Wyden, and Casey, and I would ask if any of our Republican colleagues want to join us as well, with sending a letter to President Biden today calling for the establishment of a position of beneficiary advocate at SSA. While every Social Security employee is an advocate for beneficiaries, I believe this position will elevate the needs of beneficiaries within the agency and is modeled after a similar office within the IRS. SSA is extremely efficient agency. This is something Republicans and Democrats can agree on. Its operating budget for retirement, survivor, and disability programs is less than 1% of the benefits paid each year. As I said earlier, the private sector envies this. They wish they could be that efficient. But we can't be efficient without more funding, and with 10,000 baby boomers retiring a day, and with many Americans needing essential in-person visits to the field office, this has become a necessity. Lastly, I would note that Social Security 2100, a sacred trust with over 200 co-sponsors, includes several critical customer service improvements, including one authored by our own Brian Higgins from Buffalo to prevent field office closures unless certain requirements are met. We look forward to that markup in later this month or the early part of June. It is Congress's responsibility to vote and improve and protect Social Security benefits Americans have paid for with each and every one of their paychecks. With that, I would yield to Mr. Hearn for his comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this important hearing, and thank you to all of our witnesses today for being here. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge our former colleague, our friend, Tom Reed, who retired from the House last week, allowing me to be here as the ranking member for this subcommittee. He demonstrated a commitment to working with our friends across the aisle to find real solutions to the problems that everyday Americans face, and I hope to continue that tradition with today's hearing. As you know, Social Security touches the lives of every single American, but over the past 2 years, the American public has struggled to get in touch with the Social Security Administration for even the most basic services. In my home district in Oklahoma, seniors are completely unable to reach the Social Security Administration by phone, and as a result, my elderly constituents end up calling my staff after many failed attempts to call the office at Social Security Administration. By extension, we've become the Social Security Administration call center. Likewise, Congress has struggled to get timely responses from SSA, such as in this lead up in this hearing where the administration's testimony was severely delayed, which is why ranking members Brady, Reed, and Rice led a letter to Chairman Neal asking for the hearing. And Mr. Chairman, if you would so be kind to allow me to submit this April 7th letter for the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, and thanks again for having this hearing today. I look forward to working with you and all of our colleagues on this subcommittee to remove the barriers to quality service at the SSA, whether it be policy, technology, or resources. As we will hear today, the complexity of SSA's processes and policies are not only a barrier to everyday Americans trying to navigate Social Security's programs, they are also a roadblock to their own employees, taking up to 3 years for new hires to become productive. Think about that. The SSA's programs are so complex that in some cases, new hires have to study longer than it takes me to earn an associate's degree. Both Congress and the SSA bear responsibility for this complexity. So I'd like to work together to help make things simpler for those we both serve. Another major barrier to quality service relates to technology. SSA's phone systems, like many of its other information technology systems, are outdated and in desperate need of replacement. But attempts to upgrade the system during the pandemic have all failed, resulting in outages and reductions to both capacity and functionality, resulting in long hold times, disconnections, or failures to even reach the system in the first place. Although the SSA has made significant investments in IT modernization, in some cases, these advancements actually increase the time and effort to complete cases. So I'd like to learn more about how SSA is tracking active cases to ensure that the American public is receiving a return on those investments. Finally, while adequate resources are part of this solution, it's just as important to make sure the SSA is using its resources wisely. The SSA's administrative budget is made up of a combination of money from the trust funds and general revenues for SSI and other workloads. While the Social Security Trust Fund has a large surplus now, that surplus was built over 4 decades and is expected to be depleted in just over 10 years, meaning every trust fund dollar spent administering the program is a dollar that can't be paid in benefits, bringing us $1 closer to a trust fund exhaustion. Likewise, every general revenue dollar spent as a part of SSA's budget is a dollar taken from hardworking taxpayers that can't be used to pay for other priorities, including benefits. So it's important to make sure that these dollars are spent effectively. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now you go back.
Thank you, Mr. Hearn. Without objection, all members' opening statements will be made part of the record. We will now turn to our panel of witnesses. Thank you all for joining us today, and I will introduce all of the witnesses and recognize each one in turn to testify. We'll begin with Grace Kim, who is the Deputy Commissioner of Operations at the Social Security Administration. We also have a number of other experts on Social Security customer service who we will hear from, including Tracy Groninger, Directing Attorney for the Economic Security Team at Justice and Agent, Bethany Lilly, Senior Director of Public Policy at the ARC of the United States. She is also testifying on behalf of the Consortium for Constituents with Disabilities Social Security Task Force. Peggy Murphy, immediate past president of the National Council of Social Security Management Associations. Yanira Cruz, president and CEO of the National Hispanic Council on Aging. Allison Weir, policy advocate and attorney at the Greater Hartford Legal Aid in the great state of Connecticut. And last but not least, Rebecca Vallis, a senior fellow at the Century Foundation, where she directs the Disability Economic Justice team. Each of your statements will be made part of the record in its entirety. Without objection, witnesses are asked to summarize their testimony in 5 minutes or less. To help you with that time, you will see a timing clock counting down your 5 minutes, either in front of you, in the room, or on your screen. For those of you who are joining remotely, please remember to unmute yourself before you begin to speak and mute again after you finish. Deputy Commissioner Kim, thank you for joining us. Please begin.
Chairman Larson, Acting Ranking Member Hearn, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me to discuss service delivery at the Social Security Administration. I'm Grace Kim, Deputy Commissioner for Operations. As a former regional commissioner and in my current role, I understand how critical SSA's programs and services are to the millions of customers we serve. I want to start by thanking the more than 43,000 employees who work in our 1,200 field offices, 24 teleservice centers, and 8 processing centers, and the nearly 15,000 employees in the State Disability Determination Services offices for their resilience and commitment. Their dedication enabled SSA to continue serving the public throughout an unprecedented period. Our employees are the heart of this agency, and I am honored to serve with them. Our ability to quickly transition from remote work during the pandemic to our successful reentry and resumption of walk-in service for all visitors could not have happened without the input from our managers and employees, our labor unions, and advocates. We considered every potential scenario in planning for reentry, incorporated lessons learned during the pandemic, including standing up an operations-wide telework program, and developed a plan that remained focused on the health and safety of our employees and those we serve. I am pleased that on April 7th, we successfully resumed all in-person services and reentry has been smooth. Many of our reentry and telework strategies are rooted in process changes we implemented during the pandemic. For example, we saw dramatic increases in our online and phone services and are continuing now to encourage customers to use those options if they can. We are also promoting scheduling appointments in advance, which prevents long lines and allows us to serve those who require in-person services. These measures minimize the time customers need to wait in line and spend in our offices. We have focused our on-site staff to serve those customers whose transactions require in-person or same-day service, including customers who face significant barriers such as homelessness and cannot access phone or internet services. Reopening our field offices to all walk-in service has restored a vital service channel necessary for these customers. While reentry has been smooth, we have significant service challenges. Unprecedented call volumes to our field offices and the National 800 number challenge system capacity, causing periods of unacceptable service disruption during the pandemic. We have taken many steps to overcome these challenges, and though our phone systems have stabilized since resuming walk-in service, we still do not have the same degree of functionality on our phones that we did pre-pandemic. In our field offices, employees are balancing nearly 140 workloads while handling more customer calls and phone appointments than they had before the pandemic. Right now, we are focused on meeting pent-up demand for Social Security card requests while also spending considerable resources on our mandatory program integrity workloads, which ensure we correctly pay people currently receiving benefits. This comes at a cost, and we are seeing backlogs for routine changes, disability cases, appeals, and other workloads. We are at our lowest staffing level in 25 years. This has been driven by years of insufficient funding and hiring freezes, compounded by unprecedented attrition. We are struggling to replace our employee losses, especially in the state DDSs, resulting in growing backlogs in disability workloads. We have limited overtime to compensate for staffing shortages, and employees have been carrying more than their share of the burden. This is reflected in our employee engagement scores, where the overwhelming sentiment is that our workloads are unreasonable. To engage and retain employees, we need to provide them with manageable workloads, modern tools, and the training and development needed to build a successful career at SSA. We are depending on the support of Congress. Our fiscal year 2022 appropriation is insufficient to provide the level of service your constituents expect and deserve. With the necessary funding, like the President's fiscal year 2023 budget request, we will address hiring and workload challenges, technology needs, complex program policy, and an overarching need to modernize. I hope you will support the President's request to help us improve service for the millions who count on us. I thank the subcommittee for your continued support, and I will be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Kim. And now we'll recognize Ms. Groniger. You are recognized. Please begin.
Good afternoon, Chairman Larson, Acting Ranking Member Hearn, and members of the subcommittee. I'm Tracy Groniger, Director of Economic Security at Justice and Aging. Our organization is committed to using the power of law to advocate for the rights of low-income older adults. Today, I'd like to talk about the importance of the Social Security Administration's customer service, which connects older adults and people with disabilities to key programs like Social Security and Supplemental Security Income, or SSI. These programs provide the income support people need to pay for essentials like housing, food, clothing, and other necessities. This is particularly important in addressing some of the effects of systemic discrimination that increase the likelihood of poverty for certain groups of older adults, such as women, who make up a majority of Social Security and SSI recipients, and older adults of color and LGBTQ seniors, who have disproportionate poverty rates compared to white, straight, older adults. Through its customer service, SSA acts as a critical resource to individuals by providing information, answering questions, interpreting complicated rules and requirements, translating information into languages other than English, and generally providing the support people need to access benefits they're eligible for. Yet, as the number of beneficiaries has increased, SSA's administrative funding and staffing has decreased, with an operating budget that has gone down 14% since 2010 after accounting for inflation. The number of beneficiaries has risen by 21% during this time, but the number of trained employees at SSA available to serve them has declined by 13%. This is why it is so important that Congress provides appropriate funding to the agency. SSA's budget constraints have led to longstanding customer service issues that were only exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. I would like to highlight 4 points. First, providing in-person walk-in assistance is an essential part of SSA's customer service. Low-income older adults in particular may need this type of support and are more likely to lack access to the internet. Face-to-face interactions can mean the difference between poverty and economic security. One advocate told us of an older adult client without stable housing who spent months trying to navigate SSA's systems to get his benefits. The advocate and his client repeatedly used SSA's phone systems to try to get assistance from SSA offices with no success. When they were finally able to go into an SSA field office in person, however, they were able to accomplish in 45 minutes what they couldn't achieve in hours on the phone. A knowledgeable claims representative processed his paperwork and was also able to get him a notice of benefits to accompany a housing application he was preparing to submit. As the advocate noted, it was simply incredible how helpful it was to go with him in person. Second, along with in-person services, telephone assistance is also vital, and SSA must work to improve it. We've heard from advocates, especially in recent months, of busy signals, dropped calls, long wait times, and insufficient access to staff in field offices. We encourage SSA to move quickly to resolve these concerns and to repost local field office numbers so that advocates and claimants can more easily obtain the help and information they need to access benefits. Third, in my written statement, I provide recommendations for SSA to improve its online services for those older adults who are fortunate enough to have access to the internet. Finally, SSA should take steps to expand its outreach to underserved communities. The agency should engage in research to identify communities where there are gaps between the likely need for benefits and the actual assistance people there are receiving. The agency could then make targeted efforts to connect people in those communities to benefits. Justice in Aging also supports legislation that would improve SSA's customer service and benefits. For example, we endorsed the Social Security 2100, a Sacred Trust Act, which would improve customer service in several important ways. In closing, I want to reiterate that it is critical to provide SSA with sufficient funding to address longstanding areas of concern, and for SSA to take necessary steps to ensure that people can access and keep benefits they are eligible for. We hope Congress will provide the agency with the necessary funding and support it needs to effectively accomplish these goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Groniger. And we will now recognize Ms. Lilly. Ms. Lilly, please begin.
Chairman Larson, Acting Ranking Member Hearn, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. My name is Bethany Lilly, and I am the Senior Director of Public Policy for the ARC of the United States. As you noted in your opening, I am testifying today on behalf of the Consortium for Constituents with Disabilities Social Security Task Force. And I'm going to focus my remarks on three things, getting into much greater detail in my written testimony. The importance of Social Security providing strong customer service to people with disabilities, the current backlog of cases, and the solutions needed to address these customer service challenges. For millions of people with disabilities, including veterans, Social Security disability benefits provide crucial income support. In 2021, the average disability payment per month was $1,143 a month. That comes out to less than $14,000 a year to live on. But this modest support really is what pays, as Tracy said, for the rent and for the groceries and keeps people safely housed and safely fed. To access these benefits, people with disabilities must navigate an incredibly complex disability determination process. It shouldn't take a law degree to navigate these labyrinthian rules, but it really does. This is especially a problem since these benefits are designed to help those with disabilities who often, by definition, run into problems filling out paperwork or responding to things on a deadline. This complexity also requires high-quality service from SSA to ensure that well-trained staff can answer complex questions. While disability benefits are SSA's most complicated programs, SSA also helps people with retirement benefits, name changes, enumerations for new citizens, new babies, Medicare enrollment, very important for people with disabilities, and many other functions. In March 2020, all of these functions shifted abruptly online, over the phone or via the mail. That was the only way we could communicate, given that hundreds of field offices across the country had closed due to the pandemic. The agency managed this transition despite over a decade of underfunding that has left SSA at a distinct disadvantage, especially with regards to staffing and outdated technology. As Tracy mentioned and discussed in extensive detail, there is a desperate need for in-person services, especially for low-income older adults and people with disabilities, whose face disparities in access to the internet and may have limited phone minutes, even if they want to try and access services via the phone. We are glad that SSA began their reopening last month, in no small part because of the growing challenges that SSA faces. Estimates suggest that more than 500,000 people have not received SSA disability benefits to which they were likely entitled. And that is even based on recent declining trends in applications for disability cases. And while we're not sure how many people experiencing continued symptoms from a COVID-19 infection, known as long haulers or folks who have long COVID, are going to actually meet the SSA disability standard, which is one of the strictest in the world, we do know that some additional cases should be expected because COVID-19 and long COVID have complications for other pre-existing conditions. Part of this decline in cases is no doubt related to the current backlog of people who have applied and are waiting for an initial or reconsideration decision. There are now over 1 million of those cases, and on average, people are waiting 6 months for an initial decision and 6 months for an appeal. That is nearly twice as long as it has been in the past. As Congress did when we faced a similar backlog for hearings before ALJs, this issue can be addressed with targeted funding for backlog reduction. SSA has shown that when it is given the right funding, it can get the job done. And as I mentioned before, SSA has already been overfunded for over a decade. You have heard these numbers a few times already today, but SSA's operating budget has fallen 14%, with an associated drop in staffing of 13%. And during the same time period, the number of Social Security beneficiaries has increased 21%. It is a credit to the employees of Social Security that millions of people who turn to SSA when they need assistance are served at all, even if that service is sometimes minimal or inadequate. This is a long-term funding deficit that Congress needs to address now. In addition to addressing this funding crisis, we would urge action on the Chairman's Social Security 2100, A Sacred Trust Act, which has a number of benefit and customer service improvements, including the field office protections mentioned earlier. In particular, we are very glad that Acting Commissioner Kezakazi announced that she was planning to respond to advocate concerns about inflation and raise the representative fee cap recently. But it would be very helpful if Congress could index that to inflation. And there are other desperately needed improvements that I get into in my testimony. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lilly. And now Ms. Murphy is recognized. Ms. Murphy, please begin.
Chairman Larson, Ranking Member Hearn, and members of the subcommittee, my name is Peggy Murphy. In addition to being the immediate past president of NICSMA, I am the district manager of the Great Falls, Montana Social Security Office. On behalf of the National Council, thank you for the opportunity to be here today to provide our frontline perspective of SSA's customer service. I have the unique privilege of being the only witness here who is working in a field office and is up close and personal with the challenges our customers, employees, and managers are facing when it comes to customer service. I'm personally responsible for 4 offices in Montana. Today, I can speak from my own experience and for the over 2,700 managers across the country. Although our individual circumstances are different in our offices, our biggest challenges are largely the same. Changing customer needs, hiring, recruiting, and retention of staff, infrastructure issues, and IT limitations. We learned during the pandemic that SSA can accomplish a significant amount of work remotely via telephone and the internet. Many customers filed claims online. While these were positive developments, there's still so much that needs to be done. For example, neither survivor nor auxiliary applications can be filed online, nor can most supplemental security income claims. This was the case pre-pandemic, but became even more problematic during the pandemic as it was more and more difficult to schedule an appointment. This was largely due to the increased demands placed on telephone services, which required us to shift our employees from taking claims to answering phones. With our employees at home, our inability to navigate in a fully electronic environment required someone to be in the office daily. Our members were in the office every day to handle all mail and non-portable work and to provide in-person service for critical cases. Now that we're back in the office, these limitations are even more apparent. Although managers and employees across the country are committed to our customers, it is clear our business model needs a complete overhaul. Our members strive to provide a high standard of customer service in our offices. The pandemic has emphasized how critical it is for SSA to transition and embrace automation, technology, and self-help tools such as internet claims, online enumeration, and telework for employees. From my perspective, SSA is at a critical juncture as we face the future. We are trying to deliver every possible service option without the resources, infrastructure, and policies to do so effectively and efficiently. Our existing business model is not designed to deliver the customer service that we've promised the American people. We are doing what we can with current funding, staff, and policies. Policies that in many cases make the program difficult for our customers to navigate and equally hard for our employees to administer. We need IT modernization and dedicated funding to modernize systems to the standards Congress and the public expect. From our perspective, SSA needs to address 4 specific IT areas: modernize core agency applications, improve SSA's telephone system, implement national scanning and remote printing, and implement technologies that will improve access to our services. As a field office manager, I am so proud of the work that we do. I still get to make a difference every day. Employees are helping customers receive benefits and resolve issues. There's no greater agency to work for when it comes to the impact we get to make on our customers' lives. However, we are at a critical impasse. The demand for service is high, we are losing staff, and morale is low. Many employees have left the agency for the private sector or other federal agencies that offer higher pay and less stressful jobs, and telework has become a deal breaker for some. They simply don't want to work for us without telework as an option. I'm concerned about how we can attract and retain employees. SSA must distinguish itself as an attractive employer to recruit our future workforce. We should take this opportunity to reassess the customer experience and what it means to provide world-class customer service. This is a moment for SSA to redefine itself, its mission, and to finally move into the 21st century. Thank you again for the opportunity to provide our frontline perspective of strengthening Social Security's customer service. Our members are personally committed to the mission of the agency in providing the best service possible. We want to ensure the American public benefits from the lessons learned during the pandemic. We respectfully ask that you consider our comments and appreciate any assistance you can provide to us in ensuring our customers receive the critical and necessary service they deserve from the Social Security Administration. I am also happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. And now, Dr. Cruz, you are recognized. Dr. Cruz, please begin.
Thank you, Chairman Larson. Good afternoon. I am Yanira Cruz, President and CEO of the National Hispanic Council on Aging. We work to improve the lives of Hispanic older adults, their families, and caregivers. We reach and serve our communities in a linguistically, culturally, and age-appropriate manner, bridging gaps in language, culture, formal education, and age. I am here before you today to discuss the importance of Social Security's customer service and express our support for Chairman Larson's bill, Social Security 2100, a sacred trust. At a time when it can be difficult to find common ground, we find it in the nonpartisan support of Social Security. According to a recent report by AARP, Social Security received a 96% approval rating among Americans, regardless of their political affiliation. Social Security helps older American workers who become disabled, wounded warriors, and families in which a spouse or parent dies. It is a major source of retirement income, providing a foundation of retirement protection for nearly all Americans. Social Security also lifts more than 16 million older adults out of poverty. Without it, roughly 4 in 10 older adults would live below the poverty line. It is a major importance for older adults of color. There is a wide racial retirement wealth gap, with Latino and Black workers benefiting considerably because of average lower lifetime earnings and higher disability rates. Women also benefit significantly from Social Security, making up more than half of older adult beneficiaries. Women tend to earn less than their male counterparts, live longer, and accumulate less savings. Given its importance and wide consumer base, customer service is of the most importance. As a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, Social Security field offices closed in-person services and recently reopened. And during the height of the pandemic, in-person appointments at field offices were limited to dire situations. While SSA.gov allows beneficiaries to do many things, such as applying for benefits, it requires access to the internet, access to a computer or device, and access to the internet, and digital literacy to navigate the site. Let's remember that the average monthly cost of internet access is about $70 a month, an expense that can be out of reach for those who can barely afford food. In a 2021 report from the Technology Policy Institute in Cornell University, show that nearly 22 million American older adults do not have internet access at home, which represents nearly 42% of the nation's 65 and older population. Technology exacerbates social divisions and inequities, with the report showing a correlation between digital disengagement and race, disability, health status, educational attainment, immigration status, rural residence, and income. However, these hurdles can be overcome with an expansion of field offices in rural areas and communities of color. And when working with Latinos and other diverse populations, it is imperative that customer service providers consider language, which goes beyond direct translation of documents and includes dialects and literacy. Direct translations do not always translate the way they are intended. Additionally, many indigenous languages were not historically written among some Hispanic subgroups. And so health literacy is another element that needs to be considered when working with particular populations, especially if English is not their primary language. And according to the National Assessment of Adult Literacy, 70% of adults over the age of 60 had difficulty in using print materials, and 80% had difficulty using documents such as forms. In-person interactions at local field offices can assist with overcoming these health literacy challenges. We support the need for the Social Security Administration to have the resources and staff that it needs to address these issues and strengthen its customer service. We also respectfully encourage the committee to move and vote on HR 5723, Social Security 2100, a sacred trust. Maintaining a robust number of field offices in communities that need them the most is one of the best ways to enhance customer service. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cruz. Now, Ms. Weir, you are recognized. Ms. Weir, you may please begin.
Good afternoon, Chairman Larson, and Acting Ranking Member Hearn, and members of the committee. My name is Allison Weir, and I'm an attorney and policy advocate at Greater Hartford Legal Aid in Hartford, Connecticut. GHLA is a not-for-profit law firm whose attorneys provide clients living in poverty with free representation for legal issues. Our work includes representing people appealing adverse disability determinations when applying for Social Security disability insurance and supplemental security income. Most of our clients have been denied after applying for disability benefits on their own. They cannot work due to their disability, so they rely on the benefits they receive from SSI or FSDI. Disability applicants need robust customer service to access these benefits. Customer service at Social Security Administration does not make this easy. The phone system at the Hartford field office, for instance, routinely hangs up after 15 minutes. When it's not disconnected, there's usually a 2-hour wait before you get to a real person. When you get that real person, the help you get depends on who answers the phone and how many other calls they're juggling. The office is badly understaffed, and that's reflected in the level of customer service. If the request takes any time, you may be put on hold or in the call disconnected. Some of our clients have difficulty communicating on the phone or explaining the evidence of their disability without showing it to a SSA caseworker. These challenges can require a very patient and well-trained caseworker, but the level of customer service we've seen at the Hartford office is spotty at best. Some caseworkers demand information that's simply not required for the application, for instance, suggesting that more training and supervision is needed. There are other basic failures with remote communication. For example, early in the pandemic, the fax machine at the Appeals Council ran out of paper and was not restocked for months. So applicants cannot fax documents. Interpreter services suffer from a lack of resources. Our advocates have had hearings where the interpreter hung up mid-sentence during the course of a hearing, and in one hearing, the interpretation service was so uneven, there were 3 different interpreters over the course of the hearing. Mail handling is also an issue. An IG investigation found that field offices were overwhelmed by mail duties, and the administration lacked comprehensive procedures to track and return important original documents such as driver's licenses, passports, and naturalization documents that the administration requires to prove eligibility. This conclusion matches our experience with our local field office. Applications may be lost for months, if not longer. We had one client whose application was mailed into the office and did not emerge for 2 months. 2 years before it was found. We advise clients not to send original important documents because those documents could be lost. The issues with remote services could be avoided with more in-person services. You cannot apply for SSI online, so if the phone system doesn't work and there's no confidence that your application that's mailed in will not be lost, in-person service really is your only option. More staffing to facilitate walk-in appointments would help. The proposal in the Social Security 2100 bill to reserve field offices is an important first step in ensuring people like our clients can access their benefits. When clients are approved for disability benefits, what should be automatic and swift processing for payment of those benefits is often not. We have clients who've been approved for benefits but have not received their money for over a year. One GHLA client called the field office when he was approved, when he was told he was eligible for benefits, but he was told by the field office that he should not expect to hear anything for months. The field office would have been notified of the decision when it was made and should have begun processing those benefits immediately. Our disabled clients rely on the customer service of the field offices. Customer service is critical to ensure that the system works to provide those most in need of financial assistance due to disability can get some help. Our clients rely on these benefits to pay their rent, buy their food, and pay for basic needs. They often wait years from the initial application to final resolution. During that time, their financial situation becomes more precarious, their health declines, and sometimes they may not even, things may get worse than that. Sufficient, well-trained customer service could help reduce overall wait times, provide better assistance to applicants with their initial applications, provide more expeditious application processing, fewer lost applications and documents, and fewer delays between approval and award of benefits. Thank you for addressing this important issue, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Weir, for your statement. And Ms. Vallis, you are recognized. Please begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Hearn, Acting Ranking Member Hearn, and members of the subcommittee for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Rebecca Vallis. I'm a senior fellow at the Century Foundation, where I lead TCF's Disability Economic Justice team. I'm also proud to serve as co-director of the recently formed Disability Economic Justice Collaborative, which brings together more than 30 leading disability organizations, think tanks, and research organizations to apply disability as a lens across economic policymaking in the U.S. To summarize one of the key through lines of my fellow witnesses' testimony today, since I have the honor of batting cleanup, eligibility doesn't equal access. This is a lesson I learned in spades during my years as a legal aid attorney, representing people with disabilities and older Americans facing barriers to accessing critical benefits they were legally eligible for, but which remained out of reach. Today's hearing comes at a critical moment as the nation continues to rebuild and recover from an unprecedented pandemic that has tested the mettle of America's social insurance infrastructure, while highlighting the importance of ensuring our social insurance programs are accessible when people need them most. It is against that backdrop that I will offer 3 brief points today and refer the committee to my written testimony for fuller detail on each. First, ensuring that all eligible Americans can access SSA's benefits in a timely manner and receive high-quality customer service must be a bipartisan priority for Congress and for SSA. While most public debate on Social Security typically centers around eligibility for and adequacy of benefits, critical topics that this subcommittee has explored on many occasions with thanks to Chairman Larson for his leadership, delivering on Social Security's promises also requires ensuring that eligible individuals and families are able to access SSA's vital programs in their time of need. Yet, in a drumbeat you've heard throughout today's hearing, a decade-plus history of Congress underfunding SSA's already incredibly lean operating budget, worsened by the pandemic, has spurred several urgent crises in SSA's customer service. The waterfront has already been well covered by my fellow witnesses, but 2 examples that I will reiterate because of their particular urgency in this moment are that SSA's 1-800 line is frankly in abysmal shape due to outdated technology and understaffing, and it has been for some time. And secondly, people with disabilities are facing unconscionable waiting times for disability decisions because of serious backlogs. As the chairman mentioned, according to GAO, between FY 2008 and FY 2019, 109,725 applicants for disability benefits in this country died waiting for their appeals. Thousands more have died waiting for decisions since then. This brings me to my second point. Delivering on Social Security's promises will require that Congress finally provide SSA with adequate administrative resources. You've heard well the numbers of SSA's budget dropping 14% after adjusting for inflation at a time of steadily rising need. And of course, the pandemic has already further added to the agency's challenges. But I'll add to that the cost in human terms of underfunding this critical agency is steep and it is shameful. Delays in accessing SSA's programs cause struggling individuals and families to skip meals, to go without needed medical care, to lose their homes, and as I noted, most tragically, thousands of people die every single year in this country waiting for disability benefits. I learned this early on in my time as a legal aid attorney when one of my clients with several significant physical and mental disabilities passed away before the date came for his hearing. He had been wrongfully denied disability benefits twice already because of challenges he had faced navigating the application process without help from a lawyer. He was in his mid-30s when he passed away. It doesn't have to be this way, and the time has long passed for Congress to continue to tell SSA to do more with less. The casualties are your constituents. In addition to providing SSA with adequate resources, in my remaining time, I'll briefly make my last and third point. There are several common sense steps that SSA and Congress can and should take to improve access to SSA's vital programs, many of which would also shrink the administrative burden on SSA and its field offices in the process. I'll refer the subcommittee to my written testimony for fuller discussion, but I will note that SSA will strongly benefit from the creation of a beneficiary advocate, and I thank the chairman for his support of that important proposal today. It's long overdue, as Acting Ranking Member Hearn mentioned, to simplify a great deal about Social Security's processes, most notably the SSI application, which also needs to be put fully online. As Bethany said, Ms. Lilly said, you shouldn't need a law degree to access disability benefits. I'm over my time, and so I'll refer the committee to my written testimony for the other recommendations that I make, and I thank you for the opportunity to testify today and look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Vallis, and I want to thank all the witnesses. It's rare that you hold a committee hearing like this and basically hear unanimity amongst all the testimony. And a common theme, of course, through all of it is Congress's responsibility to act. On a larger scale, Congress hasn't enhanced Social Security in more than 51 years. The price of a gallon of milk in 1971 was 72 cents. We all know the changes that have taken place since then, and yet Congress has not acted, and all of you articulated the issue that's in front of us, and as all of you indicated, only further underscored by this pandemic that we're living through. Acknowledging as well that even before the pandemic, these issues were apparent, and with more than 10,000 baby boomers a day becoming eligible for Social Security, it only further exemplifies the need and responsibility for Congress to act. Also consistent in the testimony was citing the real problem. Astounding that 22 million Americans have no access to the internet. And therefore, that means that 42% of Americans, even if they wanted to use the internet or electronics or telephonics to make contact find themselves in a position where they can't. And so that access, that person-to-person contact, still in this day and age, is vitally important and necessary. The other thing is that, and this committee is well-versed in this, Mike Thompson talks about telemedicine all the time in terms of what we need to do to upgrade technology and how we can make this efficient agency even more efficient. And I know that's something that Democrats and Republicans both agree on. So the question is that I have for all of you, how do you balance that to bring it together? The need to address that 42% of the current population we are serving that doesn't have the technological asset and will need that one-on-one relationship, along with upgrading at the same time technology to the point where it provides better access, it provides ease of filling out applications, et cetera, and modernizing the system. And Ms. Kim, I'll give you the first opportunity to respond.
Chairman Larson, I would respond by saying the way that we balance those two competing interests is to have an adequate budget to hire staff to replace our losses and have a budget to adequately invest in IT. We saw during the pandemic that we were able to move much of our work, 99% of our work, online or by phone. But we also knew that we were not meeting the needs of many people facing significant barriers who needed our face-to-face service. So by re-entering and opening our offices once again to all the public, including those who don't have an appointment, that has provided a vital service channel to those individuals who have really struggled during the pandemic to access our benefits. Given our budget shortfall, we have been forced to prioritize our IT needs so that they best align with our customer service. There were some things that we were able to do during the pandemic that I think furthered that with the limited resources that we had. Since we couldn't put the SSI application online, that's a complex, multi-year undertaking. Instead, we worked to develop a tool that would allow customers who do have access to the internet or a third party who can help them establish a protective filing date for their SSI application. That's a release that we were able to do right before we re-entered, and we've already seen more than 50,000 individuals establish a protective filing date for their SSI. We've also been able to make enhancements to our Social Security website. We used input from customers so that our website is more accessible, more understandable. It's written in a language that anyone can understand in order to help them use our website in a way that is much more meaningful. These are just two examples of the ways that we have tried to prioritize
Thank you, Ms. Kim.
our technology.
I want to ask Ms. Murphy, because I was impressed with all the testimony, how everyone referred to the fact that there are both urban concerns and concerns amongst the very poor and urban centers of our country, but representing a very rural part of the country out in Montana, I believe you said. Ms. Murphy, how would you respond to the same need of balance?
Absolutely, thank you for the opportunity. And I would say, of course, I agree with Grace Kim in her comments about the funding that we need. For me personally, in the field office, what I need is the hiring and the tools to be able to administer our programs. And technology is the answer for us. It coupled with our ability to meet people and put our face-to-face service at their disposal. One of the best feel-good stories for me is I am in a rural area, and my service area covers hundreds and hundreds of miles, and we are able to use video service for the most vulnerable in my state. The most vulnerable in my state sometimes come from our Indian reservations. I have 4 in my service area, and we're able to use video service technology to, for folks who don't have internet, they can come into the IHS clinic and they get to meet with me or one of my staff members. So it's a hand in hand. We continue to have the face-to-face service for those who need it, but we also have to enhance the tools for the ones who can go online. We want them to go online and to be able to have a one-stop shop and get the job done. And then at the same time, for the ones who need to meet with us, we need to be available to meet with them.
Thank you. I am remiss, I should have said before I began, but in my enthusiasm to get to the questions, we'll now proceed under the 5-minute rule with questions for the witnesses. Members who are joining remotely are reminded to unmute themselves when they begin and mute again after they finish. And I will begin now with recognizing Mr. Hearn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Murphy, as you noted in your testimony, Social Security's programs and processes are so complex that it can take a few years for new employees to get up to speed, and others have noted how this complexity can be a substantial barrier to individuals trying to access services. The question would be is, what in your view, your experiences, can be done to simplify the administration's processes to lower the burden on both the public and the administration's workforce?
Thank you, Ranking Member Hearn. I would say that definitely it is a problem. It's hard to learn. When you put it in like you did when you spoke, you said it takes longer to get a degree than it does to become proficient, or it's longer to become proficient with us rather, because our programs are so complex. And Grace said that we have 144 workloads that we're responsible for. So in what other industry does one employee have 144 workloads that they're responsible for? So the programs that we administer at the heart of our mission is disability, retirement, Social Security, supplemental security income, and Medicare. At the heart of that, that's what we have to be able to do well. We need to be able to train, have the training, have the resources to provide good training, on-time training. And there are complexities in administering our programs that are very, very difficult to learn. So I definitely think that our training, it's the complexity of our programs and what's on our table that makes it very hard. And again, it scares me that when we're recruiting employees and they see the complexities and they see how long it takes before they're proficient and able to actually do what we do and take care of the American public. Our best recruiting tool, when I'm interviewing somebody to ask them if they'd like a job at SSA, I say, you get to touch the life and make a difference for somebody every single day that you come into the office. But when you go through that training program, and it takes years to be able to understand the complexities of how to administer the SSI program or the Title II program or the other 144 workloads that we're going to teach you, I think it's very imperative that we put the work where the resources are. We shift some of the work that we can to different parts of our agency where we have the resources. The things that translate into immediate payment to our customers, we need to focus and train on those as soon as possible upon entry into working for us.
If I may, I'd like to ask Ms. Kim, in your role, what SSA is doing to lower these impediments and to simplify the processes. If you could give us some updates, if that's something that's even possible to do, consider the complexity.
Well, given our constrained budget, we've been looking for opportunities to marry those competing interests of trying to deal with complex program policy or policies, and then using technology and things to help us serve our customers in a more efficient way. And one of the ways, for example, I think during the pandemic where we struggled was the need to provide original documents for enumeration transactions. So one way that we overcame that was to look at our use of video and be able to marry that with the data exchanges that we have with states and their DMVs. And we were able to use video to meet with customers as opposed to them coming into our field offices, conduct the interview, verify their identity through the DMV, and then be able to issue replacement cards. This was one of our biggest hurdles during the pandemic. And I'm pleased to say that that pilot that we started in the pandemic was so successful that we've now rolled out this video technology to all of our field offices. We just completed the rollout this month, and we will be conducting video for any customer who would prefer to meet with us in that way. But they don't have
Ms.
to
Kim,
draw.
if I may, just with the time remaining, is there anything that this committee, and then to the broader Ways and Means, do to help? I mean, it's obviously very complex. It's very impactful to those who need it, those among us who need it the worst. And we all have sit here, both sides of the aisle, the witnesses, members of Congress have acknowledged it, and nobody's denied that our constituents are having problems. I mean, and that, as the chairman said, you can't even imagine how big a hurdle that is that we've surpassed just in this day and age in Congress. So the question is how do we all work together to solve this problem? Because we got to solve the underlying issue before we just put a lot of more money toward it. Are there specifically, and past my time, but are there specific statutes, processes that we in Congress can help to make your life easier?
Well, I'll just say respectfully that budget is a concern for us. Resources are a concern in trying to address complex program policies. But that said, I mean, I think where we would like assistance is trying to eliminate paper workloads, eliminating the need for wet signatures. Those are the kinds of things that keep us mired in this manual paper process, and those are things that, as an agency, we are looking to address right now.
Thank you. I appreciate your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Hearn. We now recognize the Chairman of the Oversight Committee on the Ways and Means Committee, Mr. Pascrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you for your tireless efforts to protect and expand Social Security. Congress, and especially our panel, has a special responsibility to protect people's earned Social Security benefits. And I want to apologize to all 10 of you, because you probably heard this before. You probably heard our questions before, because this didn't just happen yesterday. This has been going on for over 15 years with Democratic presidents and Republican presidents. So let's be honest, because that's what we're here. I read every one of your reports before today's meeting. Very adequate, very sufficient. And I want to apologize. I sincerely want to do that. If this was about let me make it as simple as I possibly can. If this was about a battleship, it'd be a whole different discussion. This is a human situation, and we're talking about a basic need which the Congress decided and American people decided many moons ago to make it essential so that people could look forward to the future and have something at least. Now they can't even apply for it. And we blame the pandemic, you know, the plague, what's next? We've had these problems before the pandemic. And I've heard the same questions and had the same responses from employees. So I owe it to the employees as well as those folks who they take care of day in and day out. And then those that have the disabilities among those I just mentioned. Can you imagine what they go through? I mean, just the thought of somebody waiting to get responded to in a positive way, and they die. People die every day. So you heard the numbers, and all of you touched upon it. in some manner, shape, or form. The numbers. Beneficiaries increased by 21% in a very short period of time. Over the same period, Social Security funding for basic operation decreased by 14%. Now, maybe we became more efficient, you know? Like people like to compare the state of Montana's budget to New Jersey's. Well, how come New Jersey needs the money and Montana doesn't? I mean, pretty simple, basic about how many people, the density of population, the needs of the population. Nothing simple around here, nothing. Less funding means less effective staff. Funding ain't gonna solve every problem. I know that. We know that. We're grown, we're adults, we understand it. Just throwing money at a problem isn't gonna bring the solution. To make matters worse, the pandemic forced field offices to close. They've been closed for 2 years. And most of the population that we're talking about today wants to be able, eyeball to eyeball, to tell you what the problem is. That's pretty basic. They don't have fancy computers or iPhones, many of them. You know, they don't even have flip phones. That's a flip phone. During the pandemic, people seeking help over the phone from the field office in our district have faced long hours of wait time, if they ever get through. And at other times, they received no response at all. When you look at the graphs and you look at the numbers, you're astonished. It is absolutely critical that the agency provide outstanding customer service. And that is why we must provide $14.8 billion in funding for Social Security Administration. Or else not have these hearings anymore. They're not doing any good. Nobody's listening. And I would go back over the many years I've been here. I hear the same questions. We even went through a period of time in the early 90s when we were going to privatize Social Security. I don't know if you remember that. If any of you worked there that time. Remember that, Ms. Vallis? I remember it distinctly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back, but I'll say a lot more.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pasquarelli. I know that we can count on you to say a lot more after the meeting, and with that, I'll recognize Mr. Rice.
Mrs. Kim, you say that there's been a 14% shortfall in the last 10 years in the budget, inflation adjusted, is that right? Since we had 9% inflation since we adopted the American Rescue Plan, I guess the last 9% of that 14% was in the last year?
Over time, sir.
Okay. My understanding is that the budget of the Social Security Administration is about $10 billion a year for administration and $2 billion a year for technology improvements, dedicated for technology improvements. Is that correct, over the last 3 years?
I would have to check the numbers, but we
I just checked them, that's true. It's about $10 billion for administration and about $2 billion a year dedicated for technology improvements for at least 3 years, before I just went back. Now, I asked for this hearing because my office, like all these other people's offices, is getting tons of calls about the lack of service from the Social Security Administration. And it is a shame. It is a real shame that congressional offices have to do the jobs that Social Security Administration people are supposed to be doing because Social Security Administration people aren't doing it. So what percentage of your people, you say all your offices are reopened, what percentage of your people have returned to the office from home at this point?
So all but a few of our field offices are fully opened. We have a few offices that are closed because they're under construction.
Okay, what percentage of your people have returned?
We have about 50 to 60% of our staff on site in our field offices.
I would assume that's a big part of the problem right there. Now, let me ask you this. If you're getting $2 billion a year in dedicated funding for technology improvements. And that's not sufficient. What do you have a plan? Is there some number that is sufficient? I'm just curious.
Well, we've received flat funding now for the last nearly 10 years, and what we have been allocated has not been able to cover our increased costs.
Okay, well, if you've got $2 billion a year for technology improvements, and you have 70,000 employees, that's about $30,000 in technology improvements per employee. That would buy an awful lot of computers for each employee. Now, are you still using magnetic media? The last time y'all were in here, you were still storing taxpayer records on magnetic media. Are you still doing that, or have you improved your technology to the point that you're not using magnetic media anymore?
So we're improving our technology. The IT budget that you're referring to, and I will be happy to supplement the record with more detailed information, is really dedicated toward our IT infrastructure and projects that are used to improve.
Well, I hope so, because that's what the appropriation says. So are you still using magnetic media to store taxpayer information?
I would have to answer that on the record.
Okay, I understand you're still using COBOL software that was written in the 80s. Is that right?
That's correct, but we're moving away from that.
So if we're giving you $2 billion a year to modernize IT, and you're still using COBOL, and I suspect you're still on magnetic media, do you have? Please tell me that it's not just people inside of Social Security that are coming up with a plan to modernize your IT. Because I think if we did get your IT modernized and your people back in the office like the rest of the world's back in the office, if we did those two things, I suspect a lot of these problems would go away. So do you have a plan? I mean, do you have a consultant, not just somebody inside of IT and Social Security? Do you have companies that know what they're doing with modernization IT? Have they given you a plan, and do you have a budget for that?
Well, we have an IT modernization plan that we have been following, and we have brought in consultants, and we've made.
Who's your consultants?
I would have to make sure that I get that information accurately.
Okay, so we're just having this hearing, and everybody steps up and says, we need more funding, we need more funding, we need more funding, but you don't have any concrete plan that you can show us or tell us who's, coming up with this, or any numbers that are specifically you need over what period of time to get the IT where you can get off of magnetic media and get off of COBOL and actually get a phone system that works?
We can provide greater detail in response to your question on the record.
All right, and I read here that y'all have a stated goal of increasing disability applications in underserved areas by 25%. Is that true?
You mean SSI applications?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Yeah.
That's correct.
How'd you come up with that? You say we're going to target this area and we're going to increase our disability applications by 25%. Do you think that those people are more disabled, or why are you targeting specific areas to try to bump it by 25%?
Because we believe that those groups were underserved during the pandemic, and we are trying to address that service deficit by establishing a goal that meets that need.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Ms. Sanchez is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of our witnesses for joining us today. I want to first and foremost thank the chairman for his dedication to improving an agency that delivers critical services to 65 million Americans. And that means in my district alone, over 130,000 residents depend on the Social Security Administration every single day. The Social Security Administration operates the largest benefit program in the United States. The agency serves 1 in 5 people, a number that's only going to continue to grow as our population ages. But despite the growth of our aging population, their resources are shrinking. Over the past 12 years, the number of Social Security beneficiaries increased by more than 21%. Meanwhile, the agency's operational funding fell by 14%. So is it any wonder that we are having difficulties with the service that they're providing? This is just unacceptable. Funding decreases further exhaust SSA's ability to serve the public and to deliver timely services to those who need it, especially those who need it most. What's even more concerning was the lack of agency resources during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. During the first 2 years of the pandemic, field offices shifted services to the phone and online, and that was pretty much a necessary precaution to protect both visitors and SSA staff. But that move to a virtual environment only exacerbated existing service challenges for certain folks. I know that reopening field offices has been an incredible improvement for beneficiaries in my district. My office alone has seen a decrease in Social Security cases compared to the previous 2 years when SSA was operating only virtually. But despite that improvement, I know that SSA continues to be stretched very thin, and without the proper funding and resources, it's not going to be able to efficiently deliver those critical services for seniors. And I also want to point out that these services often affect the most vulnerable populations. So SSA's customer service is really a lifeline to those with the most difficult cases, those who are applying for disability benefits, those who've lost a loved one and now have to live with half of their original benefit. For these Americans facing some of the toughest challenges of their lives, SSA's customer service is a tether to their safety net benefits, and it's incredibly important. All of that is to say that the agency provides many services with very meager resources, and so we need to make those critical investments. I know that Chairman Larson's 2100 Act makes sure that our nation's seniors and every American that counts on Social Security will get the services that they deserve. Dr. Cruz, sorry, you mentioned in your testimony that the many challenges that people with limited English proficiency face when they're trying to reach Social Security by phone or when they seek service in person or online. What more do you think that Social Security can do to make sure that services and documents are available in multiple languages and accessible to people with limited English proficiency?
Thank you, Congresswoman. So I think we need to hire more bilingual staff members at field offices. So I think that would be one. I also think technology training for beneficiaries would be important.
Okay, great. Ms. Valles, you gave us some excellent suggestions for ways in which we can improve access or make Social Security benefits more accessible. People may have a legal right to them, but if they can't access them, they may as well not exist. I want to give you the remainder of my time for you to run through some other recommendations that you might have for making Social Security benefits more accessible.
I appreciate the opportunity, Congresswoman. I mentioned the importance of establishing a beneficiary advocate position, which is critical to ensure that beneficiaries have a dedicated voice within the agency. That would be a good idea outside of a pandemic, but it's especially important now. I mentioned the importance of simplifying the SSI application and getting it online. As Acting Ranking Member Hearn noted, simplification is critical, and as Ms. Lilly noted, you shouldn't need a law degree to apply for disability benefits successfully. A number of disability advocates have called for creating a navigators program to help unrepresented people facing challenges navigating the Social Security disability process. Expanding outreach is critical as well. As Ms. Kim noted, we have seen historic lows when it comes to SSI access during the pandemic. I hear Joni Mitchell's voice in my head, you don't know what you got till it's gone. Well, we saw with the field office closures how critical field offices are, but a big part of what we saw was incredible and distressing declines in access for SSI applicants and beneficiaries. I know I'm over time, but I'll mention as well the importance of an idea that many disability advocates have also come to support, which is eliminating the reconsideration stage of review in the process, something that should have bipartisan support to simplify the process and reinvest those resources in initial applications. There's more in my testimony, but thank you, Congresswoman, for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Estes is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all our witnesses for joining us today. Americans may not expect their interactions with Social Security Administration to be a pleasant one, depending on a situation in life, but I would assume that they'd want to speak to somebody if they have a problem. As been discussed earlier today, it's not been the case, particularly with Social Security offices closed for 2 years. While I'm glad SSA is finally reopening most of the field offices after numerous calls from members of Congress, it's problematic that it took so long. Of the 65 million or so Americans who receive a Social Security check each month, many are elderly beneficiaries who rely on it for more than 90% of their income. These Americans have been forced to try to call multiple times a day to speak to someone, and if by chance they get through, they found that the person on the line couldn't adequately help them. Like other members, constituents regularly seek out my office requesting assistance, and we've worked as a liaison between the individual and Social Security Administration. One man reached out after waiting 120 days, although he's told the process will only take 30 to 60 days. A parent of 2 waited 7 months for benefits. One other gentleman with a debilitating illness had to wait nearly 2 years before disability was finally approved. Government agencies should be dedicated to serving taxpayers and being good stewards of the resources they're given. While we talk about strengthening SSA's customer service, I hope we can address why SSA failed to provide basic customer service for so long, as well as why many across the country are still struggling to even get the basic access to some of those basic services. I would hope that the goal of the administration is that Americans receive customer service that compares to or exceeds that of any business that they may visit in their community, and that's not necessarily the case today. Ms. Kim, in Ms. Murphy's testimony, she mentioned that SSA's managers were having difficulties balancing the needs of the public with current telework policies. In an April 28th response to a letter that the GOP members of this subcommittee sent to Acting Commissioner Kijikawa, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit both letters for the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
The SSA stated that it will evaluate telework effects on service delivery by measuring and monitoring several areas, including customer satisfaction, service availability, workload management, employee experience, stewardship, and environmental considerations to inform future changes. Can you provide the specific criteria that are being measured and monitored and how they'll be evaluated and what would merit reconsideration of the current telework policies at the end of the evaluation period?
Certainly. What we're looking at right now is a whole host of data, including our workload data. We're looking at visitor traffic data, volumes of visitors to our field offices, their wait times where we have those values. We're also looking at possible strategies that we can employ in offices where we are seeing large numbers of visitors, and that's going to be part of our evaluation. We're spending the rest of the time this fiscal year really evaluating how our re-entry period is going. And one of the things that is available to our managers is the ability to recall employees who are teleworking and have them come back in the office if the need for service of customers warrants it. And so far, we've had to call back teleworkers since April 7th to assist with those locations where we've seen large crowds. And we have found that in those locations, those offices are able to handle even more customers than with the original on-site staff. So we're looking at those locations where we would need to make adjustments in our telework policy to make sure that we are serving customers as efficiently as possible.
Well, that's good, because I mean, experience over time is that telework isn't quite as efficient. As you said earlier, that 50 or 60% of the offices are fully staffed, or 50 or 60% of the employees are back. I'd like to see as that policy or that trial period runs through, that if there's a need, we need to get more people back in the office to be more productive to get the work done. So thank you. Ms. Murphy, I've got a brief amount of time. In the testimony, you mentioned some difficulties that SSA's had in hiring and training and retaining good quality candidates. But one of the recent OPM survey of SSA employees, more than half indicated that poor performers stayed in place. Have you found that to be the case, and do you have any suggestions on how to change that?
Oh, thank you, sir, for the question. I do think that it's definitely, we want the best of the best. It takes the best of the best to do the job that we do. And sometimes in dealing with poor performers, it's a lot of subjectivity to that situation. And with the budget that we're in and the hiring crisis that we're in, unfortunately, we're put in the position of years of documentation, first of all, to deal with poor performance that may lead somebody to finding employment elsewhere. Also coupled with the fact that a poor performer is not necessarily replaced on a one-by-one replacement. So if we lose somebody, if somebody loses the agency, we do not get to replace that person in the office that you lost them from. So oftentimes we're put in a definite quandary of what do we do? Do we keep the employee that's performing mediocre, or do we lose that employee and then risk having nobody to replace them at all? So that's a very unfortunate answer, but it's the truth.
All right, thank you, and I'm sorry I went over my time, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
We now recognize Mr. Horsford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, as always, for your leadership on these matters. Social Security is a lifeline for many of my constituents. In fact, Nevada beneficiaries receive $550 million per year in benefits. There are 5 Social Security benefit offices in Nevada, including one in my district in North Las Vegas. This is a lifeline, as I said, to my constituents, many of whom are low income and are in communities of color. And I want to commend my office, who works extremely hard to provide the Social Security benefits that my constituents have earned and that they deserve. In fact, as of April 2022, 70,221 of my constituents have received some form of Social Security benefit. Unfortunately, due to COVID-19, my constituents, who are largely from the African American and Latino communities, have been unable to receive such benefits due to a lack of staffing and resources. So, to anyone who can answer, how are you conducting outreach to communities of color who rely on Social Security as a lifeline to provide for their basic needs? And can you highlight, or do you know, why there are disparities within the Social Security Administration between communities of color?
I'm sorry, Congressman, is this addressed to me?
Anyone who can answer the question.
So we have been engaging, the Social Security Administration has been engaging in a number of outreach efforts to reach people facing barriers and communities of color. Our outreach really started during the pandemic when we were meeting with advocate groups. We meet with advocates regularly. We have done many outreach, undertook outreach initiatives both at the national and the local level, and we have established third-party contacts, established positions in every field office to act as liaisons with local community advocate groups who serve a variety of communities. And we've extended these outreach activities even beyond and continuing into reentry, where we are continuing to work with our advocate groups. We're continuing to do that outreach, and we're really trying to reach the most underserved communities and really educate them about how to access benefits through SSA.
Well, I'd like to sit down and review that plan with you to see how we can improve. When you say relying on outside advocates, so it's not a responsibility of the SAA specifically? Are we funding these activities within the Social Security Administration?
Yes, sir, we are. All right.
Well, let's look at that and review the budget. I want to switch over to inquiring about digital signatures, because this is something that has become quite an issue. The SSA requires third-party representatives to submit their clients' applications electronically, provides online forms for doing so, and accepts digital signatures on these forms. However, I've come to understand that the SSA will not recognize the claimant's digital designation of their representative without a wet signature, obtained by printing and mailing a summary of the claim to the applicant and waiting for its return. It's been mentioned to my office that this typically adds an additional 40 days to the application process for individuals, particularly persons with disabilities. So can the SSA, please clarify your policy with respect to individuals that retain a representative to file their disability claims, and what is the rationale for this policy? How does it ensure equity for those with disabilities, and how does it demonstrate a commitment to the highest level of service for those attempting to navigate a very complex disability program?
The area of digital signatures or electronic signatures is one that the agency is currently working on. I'd like to provide you with a more detailed response on the record.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I think Vallis and I are likely to say exactly the same thing about this, which is that this is a huge problem. This is something that claimants representatives run into that delay and add to the delays that I talked about in my testimony, where we're getting to 6 months before the initial determination is made. This is a huge problem, and this, the advocate groups that Ms. Kim was speaking about, we've raised this repeatedly as part of those advocate groups, and we understand SSA is working on it, but it needs to be addressed. This is a major problem.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want us to just talk about it in a hearing. I'd like to see action so my constituents can receive the benefits they're entitled to. Thank you. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. I now recognize Ms. Sewell from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The COVID-19 pandemic was difficult for the entire country, but it placed an especially heavy burden on our seniors. As we emerge from the pandemic, we must refocus on providing the necessary resources to our seniors. And that effort should begin by strengthening Social Security and providing SSA with the resources they need to improve customer service to all seniors. I am glad that the Social Security Administration has now reopened field offices to in-person visitors. Many minority and underserved communities depend on the ability to walk up and receive services and are disproportionately impacted if those benefits are reduced or delayed. As co-chair of the Ways and Means Racial Equity Initiative, I am particularly focused on making sure that SSA is serving our most vulnerable communities. Currently, I have over 158,000 Social Security beneficiaries in my district, including 36,000 disabled workers, 12,000 widows, and 16,000 children. Overall, I have 158,000 Social Security beneficiaries. For many of my constituents, the modest Social Security benefits that they receive every month is the only retirement security that they have. These are the funds that they use to pay rent, to put food on the table, and to keep the water and power on. So when an issue arises with a Social Security benefit, their physical, mental, and emotional health would be put at serious risk. Unfortunately, over the past 10 years, Social Security Administration's administrative funding dropped by 14%, while the number of beneficiaries increased by 20%. This, of course, is unacceptable, especially when we know that these resources are needed and are needed most in vulnerable communities. Every person, regardless of their economic status or the color of their skin, deserves to retire with dignity after a lifetime of work. This, after all, is an earned benefit. They've earned this right. We can and we must do better to improve Social Security for all of our seniors. My question actually is for you, Rebecca. In your testimony, you highlighted the eligibility. You highlighted that eligibility doesn't equal access. Just because you're eligible doesn't mean that you actually have access. That really resonated with me. Many of my constituents are blue-collar workers who have physically taxing occupations. They work hard their entire lives, but because of the nature of their work, they are more likely to get disability benefits. Could you elaborate on the idea of establishing a staff of SSA navigators to help underserved and disabled beneficiaries?
Thank you so much, Congresswoman, for your strong support of beneficiaries, particularly for your strong support of disability beneficiaries, because access is a huge problem, and I appreciate your reiterating that sentence, which I wish we didn't have to say out loud, but we do, because we often stop and we think, oh, we solved the problem because we created the program, but if people can't access the program, it isn't going to do much good for the intended population, which is what today's hearing is all about. A Navigators program is a new idea that's gaining real traction on the Hill, and which which we would love to work with you all on, the idea is that it would help unrepresented people who face the greatest challenges accessing disability benefits, because as you've heard us say, and we're a broken record, you shouldn't have to have a law degree to get disability benefits. This is
Or have your member of Congress call on your behalf.
Nor that, correct, and yet that is what it often requires,
Absolutely.
all too often. The idea of establishing an SSA Navigators program, and it could live under the new SSA Beneficiary Advocate, should that position be created, is that it would help especially marginalized, unrepresented, left behind applicants, such as low-income people, disabled people, rural folks. We've heard about a lot of the populations today, communities of color, the folks who are not best served, the ones who fall between the cracks. And the idea is that these navigators would help these claimants navigate the complicated process of applying for disability benefits, and hopefully this idea would also serve to streamline the disability determination process in a way that helps SSA, because it would improve
Absolutely.
development of cases at the initial level of review and reduce the need for wrongful appeals.
Absolutely. Deputy Commissioner Kim, what are your thoughts about a navigator program?
I believe that's an issue that we're talking about internally within the agency. I think I'd have to get back to you on that.
Yes, if you don't mind, for the record, providing sort of where the status of that program discussion is. I think that it's so important that we provide as many resources as possible to help beneficiaries access the resources that they actually need and have earned. And I think that the navigators have helped immensely in the arena of Affordable Care Act and trying to make sure that people have direction. And when I think about my staff, my hardworking staff in my Birmingham office, my Selma office, my Montgomery office, they spend an awful lot of time hand-holding my constituents in order for them to get the benefits that they've really earned. So I'd love to have the thoughts of where we are in terms of that.
Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady, and Mr. Davis is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I also want to thank all of our witnesses. They have been seriously helpful. I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, because although I am not a member of this subcommittee, it seems that every time you have a hearing, or every time you have an activity, or every time you're talking about Social Security, it's so important and so necessary that it draws me to the event or the activity. So I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate. Deputy Commissioner Kim, I hear from, of course, employees and individuals in my district concerns that the SSA lacks the staffing to fulfill its mission and provide quality customer service, especially the need for the more vulnerable population. And of course, I have many of those, thousands and thousands. I'm glad that the president's budget recognizes the current inadequacy of the SSA's administrative funding and the need for added funds to improve customer service. And of course, I agree with all of those individuals who have suggested that there is tremendous need as we've gone through the hearing this afternoon. I also will sign on to the navigator idea in terms of help that individuals need and would be appropriate. But let me ask you, how is the agency addressing the staffing issue, knowing that we need more staff, we don't have more staff, and of course, until sometime futuristically, even if and when we do get more staff, but what are we doing right now? How are we addressing the issue right now as it stands?
So Congressman, I'll have to say it's very challenging, the way in which we are dealing with our staffing shortage. As I mentioned, we are seeing on the federal side about a 10% attrition rate, which is a significantly high loss of employees. And some components, we're seeing higher attrition across operations. For example, in our teleservice centers, we are seeing about a 17% attrition rate. These are the employees who answer our national 800 number. In our processing centers, we're seeing about a 9% attrition rate. These are the folks that are handling people who are receiving benefits and making adjustments to their benefit amounts. Those cases are delayed. What we're doing is focusing our limited field staff right now on intake. So as we have reopened our doors and as customers have visited us, we are trying to intake their claims, their need for service, but where you will see the shortfall in our ability to serve the public is on that back end. As we're taking a member of the public's claim, the employee needs to continue to develop that claim and work it on the back end. And that is where we are seeing our staffing really impact the level of service we can provide to our customers. And as you've heard the other witnesses say, our customers are waiting an unacceptable length of time to get their cases adjudicated. And that is in large part due to our understaffing.
Thank you very much. And I never discuss Social Security, or if I do, it's rare that I don't mention the excellent work that those individuals in the office in Chicago who go above and beyond. And I want to just thank them for the tremendous cooperative spirit that they work with as we deluge them with problems and issues, and people can't get answers. Let me just ask also, in terms of overpayments and underpayments seemingly just take forever. Are there anything special that you're doing in relationship to trying to help people get those payments back more quickly?
So many of those actions are handled in our processing centers, and those are the individuals who are working to address those issues. So right now we're seeing a growing pending in our processing centers due in part, again, to our attrition. But what we are doing as an agency and across our processing centers is targeting our most aged cases. So the people who are waiting the longest for relief on whatever their issue is with the agency, we are trying to process our oldest cases first, because we don't want those customers to have to call a field office, visit a field office, call our 800 number to get their needs met. We're trying to address those first. That's how we're trying to manage our growing pending with the limited staff that we have.
I thank the gentleman, and we now recognize Ms. Del Bene.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for allowing me to join the subcommittee today, and I want to thank all of our witnesses for joining us as well on this important topic. And I want to thank you for the work that you all do to support Social Security and the seniors that depend on it. I wanted to share a couple stories that I had from constituents to talk about some of the challenges that we face within our office in terms of doing casework and helping constituents. One is from Martin. He said, after becoming a citizen, my 14-year-old daughter also became a citizen, and I'd like to apply for her new Social Security number at the SSA. I've called the Bellevue, Washington office 4 times now. Every time after a lengthy conversation about completing all the necessary forms and requirements, the call ends with them asking me to leave a message to make them call me back to make an appointment. I've done this so many times, but they never return the call to make the appointment. Each time they apologize and refer me to the same message service to book an appointment, and which they ignore again. Every time we leave my wife's mobile number, but they just don't call us back. The Social Security Administration's level of service is worse than anything I've encountered in my life in any country. I understand the pandemic has made it hard for people to stay safe and cope, but they've had almost 2 years to come up with a safe solution to serve the public and provide proper essential services like so many other government departments has done. So there's one letter we received. The other from Richard said, I contacted SSA to change my bank account for my direct deposit. A simple task in nature, however, after 5 minutes on menu items from the phone number given, I was then referred to someone who could help me. This became a recorded voice telling me to call back another time because first of the month is too busy, as is the last of the month, so try another time. This task requires nothing more than input of the account number. It shouldn't take forever to do. Can you help me expedite this? I find it amazing that I should have to contact you for this. Now, we heard yesterday that both of these cases that where they were contacted, which I appreciate, but I agree that these are situations where no one should have to contact our office to do that. And not only is it hard on them because there are so many people who don't even think to contact a member of Congress's office for help, and it's been hard on our staff too because they're trying to help, but sometimes our staff also don't get a response back from Social Security. So the question is, what can we all do to help? I know others have raised this too, but it is becoming so difficult for constituents, even on a simple issue of changing a bank account number. And we want to be a resource and be helpful too. The casework has gotten hard on this just because it's hard to get feedback. So any suggestions you have, and I know as members of Congress, ask that you have of us as well so that we can collectively get to a better place. Ms. Kim, I guess I'll direct that at you, but thank you.
Well, first of all, let me apologize for the experience that your two constituents experienced in our offices, and I'm glad, and I was personally involved in making sure that we addressed those issues, and I hope that we'll be able to resolve the second one pretty quickly. I think the first one has been resolved. With respect to what we can do, I think as I have testified, it is really a staffing and funding issue for SSA. We don't have the resources to deliver the level of customer service that we need to. And by customer service, it's not just when you meet with a member, one of our employees face-to-face, but it's taking care of the customer and completing the action in a timely manner. And so I'm hoping that with our reentry and our resumption of all of our service channels available to all customers, we'll be able to alleviate some of the issues that we saw during the pandemic, but that is not going to really make a material difference until we can get the level of funding that we need to really staff up our offices in a way that not only do we meet with the public in person, we're able to answer all the calls that come into us, and we're able to process the back-end work in a timely manner.
Thank you. I appreciate your feedback on that, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Delbeni. Mr. Byer is recognized. Mr. Byer, unmute yourself.
Chairman, thank you very much. And Chairman Larson, you have done such an incredibly steadfast, brave, persistent job over the years, pushing for ever better Social Security benefits and management. So, John, thank you very much. I appreciate being allowed to wave onto this. Ms. Kim, thanks so much for being here today. In 2018, before the pandemic, the Social Security office in Arlington, right across the river, in my district closed. This closure, we fought it hard. It was a short-sighted way to cut costs that inflicted real hardship on my constituents, especially the people least able to cope with it. Took them away from transit into a distant part of Alexandria. That office served 25,000 beneficiaries annually and was the most public transit accessible office right near the Roslyn Metro Station. It was incredibly harmful for the constituents, all to save a few dollars. What can we do to ensure that more office closures don't happen?
Congressman, I have no intention of or plans to close any field offices at this time. And if our reentry has emphasized anything, it's the vital need for our field office presence to serve customers in person.
Well, Ms. Kim, I just want to thank you for articulating this hug your customer philosophy. I was in retail automobile sales for 46 years, and I can tell you the best way by far is to get this notion from the top to the bottom of a culture that is about serving the customers in the best way we can. Things like little rules like an unreturned phone call makes an enemy for life. Ms. Lilly, thanks for your testimony today. You described the importance of customer service at SSA to people with disabilities, stating they rely on professional help from Social Security staff, lawyers, and more. Once again, when our district office closed, I was fearful of the difficulties, specifically those constituents with disabilities were going to need to go through and not having access to the office. Can you just amplify the importance of field offices for the elderly and for people with disabilities?
Certainly, and thank you for the question, because I represent people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and for those folks, they are not able to work through that paperwork without assistance. And oftentimes it's family members, or it's friends, or it's caseworkers and providers who are helping them work through that. But a big chunk of the time, it's also the staff at the field office. You know, you have folks who walk in the door and maybe they aren't able to read the notice that they got. They're not entirely sure what SSA is asking for. And they need to have that conversation with the staff at the field office of, what do you need from me? How can I don't want my benefits to get cut off. What exactly is it you need from me? And so the field office and that in-person service for many people with disabilities is kind of their only way to access this, unless they're getting assistance from someone else, be it a navigator or be it someone else. And I discussed in my written testimony a lot about the technological barriers. Just like for older adults and for people of color and for people living in rural areas, we know that people with disabilities face additional technological barriers. They're less likely to have internet access. They're less likely to have access to internet on a laptop rather than internet on a phone. And they're more likely to have access to internet on a phone. And SSA's, navigating all of SSA's websites on a cell phone, I can tell you, I've tried it a couple times, is almost impossible. If that is your only way to access the internet, you're not going to be able to get through those processes. And so having, even if you might have internet access, being able to book an appointment, being able to go to My Social Security, those are just not options. So having that field office service, again, is so crucially important. And I just want to take an opportunity to note, those field offices also do a lot of service on the phone. And then during the pandemic, the field office phone numbers were very prominently displayed on the website. Tracy mentioned this earlier. That was incredibly helpful for the caseworkers in my network who do direct service work with people trying to help sort out these issues. Because while the 1-800 number can answer some questions, there are some questions that only local field offices can answer. When SSA went back to kind of opening posture, they removed those numbers and put the 1-800 number for certain field offices. We would really like those field office numbers back on the website for every field office. We think that would be really helpful. And so it's just really, really important. I'm not surprised at all to hear that your constituents really suffered when the field office closed, and I'm really sorry about that.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, my time is up, but thank you for holding this hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Byer, and the chair now recognizes Mr. Schneider to comment.
Thank you, Chairman. I first want to thank you for hosting this important hearing. I want to thank the witnesses for sharing your experience, your perspectives, your thoughts on how we move forward, and your patience for staying so I could have a chance to talk about it. The key question is how do we make sure we provide the service that 65 million beneficiaries across the country not just need, but deserve. And I stand by the promise we made our nation's seniors decades ago that after a lifetime of hard work, sacrificing and paying into the Social Security system, they could retire with dignity and security. Social Security is the foundation of economic security in this country, and it's critical both for our aging population, but as we've discussed here, also many others who have needs and basically depend on Social Security to survive. And because the SSA and local field offices serve some of our highest need populations, it's critical that they are properly resourced to deliver the highest level of service. And I know, Ms. Kim, you touched on this about the need to make sure we have those resources, and that is being just a great challenge. Unfortunately, and I know others have talked to this, and I don't mean to kick it, what is effectively an issue that's already been discussed, but I, like everyone else, have heard from constituents struggling to get the service they need. Repeatedly, I am hearing from constituents on phones, when I meet them in their communities, walking through the grocery store, they stop me and they talk about long wait times for customer service, or that they've left voicemails and are still waiting to get a response. Some have physical limitations, as we've heard, that prevent them from going to field offices, even if they were open. Ms. Lilly, you talked about some of the barriers of technology, barriers of language, of just the ability to navigate through extraordinarily complex forms and systems on the telephone. I heard a constituent with limited English skills that was unable to find any assistance decoding the mail this person received from SSA about her disabled son's SSDI benefits. I heard from a constituent with a complex overpayment issue that despite hours on hold and after leaving countless voicemails, simply couldn't get through to SSA customer service. For the individuals who depend on SSDI benefits, wait times can have a profound impact on their daily lives and their ability to get the help they need. And I know, Ms. Kim, you've had a 30-year career with Social Security. I thank you for your service. I think back to in the 90s, as I was working with business, giving advice and counsel to corporations, we looked to Tom Peters in some of his seminal books, The Pursuit of Excellence and The Pursuit of Wow, in defining what is customer service. I think those values are as true today as they were 30 years ago, that if we eliminate complexity, if we make it simpler to get through to what people have to do, if we provide the resources, the systems, the tools to customer service agents who can then provide the service and want to provide the service, it's better. So my question is, I know the pandemic has created all kinds of challenges. We've talked about many of the things, but if people listening to this hearing were to take away 1, 2, or 3 things that would be most important to elevate the level of service that Congress can do to help you do your job, what would that be?
So from SSA's standpoint, I think the number one message that I would want to take away is that SSA has been underfunded for too long, and that without an adequate level of funding, we will not be able to continue our level of service or improve service to the level that really I would want to see us be able to deliver to the public. We just are underfunded. We don't have hiring. We need overtime, and we need proper investment in our IT investments. Those are the 3 key areas that I see need to be funded in order for us to carry out our mission and do it in a way that does not burn out our employees, because our employees are dedicated public servants, and I want to make sure that they have the tools and resources to do their jobs well.
Thank you. And I'll just add, I'm almost out of time, that I know how dedicated the employees are. I know that people aspire to make a difference. The people working at Social Security want to help the folks that are calling in for their assistance. Mr. Chairman, I look forward to continuing to work to see how we can provide the resources. We can't do it in one shot. It's not going to be solved in a day or even a year, but let's develop a long-term plan and figure out how to get it done. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider. And I would especially like to thank our witnesses today, both for your patience and also for your expertise. The purpose behind public hearings is so that there's a better understanding. More often than not, you know, it's not just about the articles that you read in the newspaper or the reports you hear from different agencies, but it's finally the ability for the give and take and the asking of questions, even though more often than not there's more speeches than there are questions. Nonetheless, it's even through those speeches that there's the ability to learn. The takeaway from this is I think everybody understands the problem and the issue, and it's one of both understaffing and need to modernize technology. Both are going to require resources. But we want to make sure that we continue to apply those resources in the most efficient way and build on an incredible reputation of an agency and what it's been able to provide, the signature plan of Franklin Delano Roosevelt that still lives today, that is the most trusted governmental program amongst all of our citizens, demands and requires all of us. And that's what I admire about this subcommittee as well, that this, and I think you heard it in the hearing today, there's general unanimity that we all have to pull together, roll up our sleeves, and get this done. And that's a combination of doing both funding and making sure it's carried out efficiently, but also technologically taking place. 42% of recipients have no connection to the internet and have got to come in person. And the humanity behind this program is always ever in the forefront. Again, I want to thank the witnesses for your testimony, all of your testimony, both verbally and your longer version will be submitted for the record. And with that, the Social Security Subcommittee will be adjourned.